What is up, sister friend? Another day, another heart to heart with Coach Emily. I hope everybody's having an amazing day. I'm super excited to record today. I actually got rid of the microphone because I think this just sounds better. And isn't that hilarious? We think we need all of these things to be official, to be taken seriously, when literally I can just record this via the laptop on Zoom and we're ready to rock and roll. So I was actually supposed to record this on GarageBand now that I remembered. Whatever. So, anywho, last week's episode, we talked a little bit about my fitness journey and having the courage to step out on your dreams and really, look at your life as an entrepreneur and really find the correlations on your growth and how you can continue to keep growing. I did a poll and you guys wanted to talk about boundaries. So we're going to talk about boundaries today. Boundaries is a pretty broad topic. So we're going to do our best. Okay. But I think we can really narrow this down into the realm that applies to you as a female entrepreneur, because boundaries, just as a human being, are crucial for our survival, honestly. But boundaries are something that I have also always struggled with and still have to constantly work on to this day. So, for example, I highly recommend first, before I dive into this, for you guys to read a couple of books or listen to different podcasts. So Brene Brown talks a lot about boundaries. If you don't know who Brene Brown is, sister friend, get it together. Okay. Brene Brown is someone you need to know about. As a woman, I highly recommend. As a man, if you're listening to this, highly recommend. Okay. But Brene Brown talks a lot about boundaries, and her podcast, what is her podcast? But her book, Daring Greatly, talks a lot about this. Her podcast is also amazing. Just search Brene Brown. So I think it's important for you to look at all the research around boundaries and fully understand them. I didn't understand what boundaries were, and I didn't really understand how to communicate them. I grew up as someone who was not taught boundaries whatsoever. And also as a recovering people pleaser and recovering performance-based love individual, boundaries are something that I struggle with immensely. I also have this shadow I still deal with it, but this belief, this inner belief that I don't deserve anything. And I want to, before you're like, oh, poor pitiful Emily, that's not the voice of that shadow. The voice of that shadow is matter of fact, plain and simple. You don't get to have that. Okay. And I just internalized that's the reality. That's the name of the game. And so when I was learning about boundaries, it was incredibly painful for my nervous system, because every fiber of my being growing up, the way I was conditioned as a child was that there were no such thing as boundaries. Boundaries in my family don't exist. Okay, I'm probably the only one who has boundaries in my immediate family, because I was taught that, how do I explain this? That not through any verbal, taught, this was how our family works, that there are no lines to cross. It's your family, so they can do whatever they want to you, speak however they want to you, and you need to accept that and suck it up because you're family and you love them no matter what. I always equate my family, and if my family is listening to this, this is no shade to you guys. We're kind of like a cult, okay? And what's done in the circle, that it's the circle. You're in the circle, you need to accept it. This is the way that it is. And this lack of boundaries really created a lot of unrest in my nervous system. And I really believe affected my people pleasing, because I might do something to upset somebody else, and then they can, verbally attack me, or I could be shunned from the family, or there's all these things, right? And I didn't understand. when I first learned about boundaries, when I first started enacting them, it was simple things like not answering my phone, or learning how to communicate that I wasn't going to be a part of something because it made me uncomfortable or was something that I did not like. Now, when you're learning boundaries and you're learning how to enact them in your life, it is uncomfortable for you and everyone around you. Because if you go from people pleasing, like myself, and saying yes to all things, putting all of your needs last, never telling anyone what you want or what you need. I mean, I was so bad at this when I was younger. Like we drove back and forth a lot from Delaware to Maryland, which is about a 2-hour drive from my dad's house, my uncle's house. I would not ask to go to the bathroom because I didn't want to be a burden or upset the other person. And so it was really bad for me. But so when I would enact boundaries of like, I'm not participating in this, you aren't speaking to me like this, it was heavy. And I would cry every time I was trying to like stand up for myself and put boundaries up, because boundaries are you loving you and saying, I'm not allowing this in my world. Where the way I grew up, this was your world, you need to accept it, kind of was the thing. Not that that was ever verbally said, it was just the way it was experienced for me. And this created a lot of anxiety in my life, but also a lot of mistrust in my own voice. So boundaries are your way of protecting yourself and loving yourself. So as an entrepreneur, when you are navigating lots of humans through sales, through messaging, through working with your current clients, through hiring a business mentor, hiring an assistant coach, whatever that looks like for you, boundaries are really, really important. Because if you don't have any boundaries, you are going to feel scattered. You're going to feel thin because you're not grounded in the things that are true for you and are the standards you kind of set for yourself. So I equate this to my family because this is the way I learned about boundaries. And this is probably how you learn about boundaries too. You might have learned certain boundaries in your family, or your religion or your school or things of that nature that have conditioned you to have loose boundaries. And I think women struggle with this a lot because we want to be all things to all people, always be there, always serving, always giving. And then when we put boundaries up, we feel like we're being a bitch. Okay. And when I put boundaries up with my family, they definitely made me feel like I was being a bitch, because they weren't used to it. They were used to me constantly saying yes. They were used to me allowing them to talk to me a certain way. And I had enough. I couldn't do it anymore. So when I first learned boundaries, I did it, I would say, the incorrect way, because the incorrect way is basically telling people, this is my boundary, you may not cross. People don't like that. The best way to teach people boundaries is by holding the boundary without saying that it is a boundary. For example, when I decided that I was going to start putting my phone on do not disturb throughout the day, that was a boundary that I didn't say. I didn't have to call my family and be like, don't call me throughout the day. I'm busy. This is my new boundary. I need space. I need time. I just started doing the thing to enact the boundary, and then they learned. They will learn. And that's what happens when you have boundaries. For example, another boundary. When I was younger, I was talked to by adults in a very dictatorship kind of way, and a way that was like, you don't get to feel this thing. And so I became very confused on how I actually felt or what I actually needed. And then as I got older and I knew that this was wrong and I wanted to have a boundary to protect my feelings, I started to communicate in a way that was they could understand. So for example, when I am getting very upset, in my family, we yell. We are yellers. We scream, we yell. It's not pretty. And so as soon as I notice that feeling that I'm about to start screaming, I shut it down. I'm like, you know what? And I will say, I'm about to start screaming and I don't want to start screaming. So I'm going to call you back later when I'm calm. That's a boundary. That's me protecting myself so that I'm not getting into a place where I'm uncomfortable and distraught and falling to pieces. I don't know why this is making me emotional. I'm actually really proud of myself on the boundaries that I have really worked hard on, because it is not easy. But boundaries are unique to each person. I can't give you a list of the boundaries that you need to have in your life, but what I can do is encourage you to start taking notice, that uncomfortable feeling, or really listening to your body. So for me personally, when things are good, when something feels good, I get these tingly electricity feeling in my forearms. When something is not good, I get my throat, and I voiced this before, my throat and chest seizes up and like gets stuck. It's like I have a frog in my throat or something. And so I'm noticing those cues. So for you, you want to pay attention to how your body is telling you this is not okay. A line is being crossed here, and you might even be clear what that line is. It takes time to really assess those things. My family is calling me right now. So really understanding how your body is saying no and yes. Literally calling me right now in the middle of this because my phone is not on do not disturb. So give me 1 second. I'm going to pause real quick. Okay. You got to pay attention to your own cues and your own boundaries. Boundaries and standards, I would say, are kind of synonymous, not fully. But I think having a standard, that's something we can like visualize and see. Boundaries can feel a little blurry. So as an entrepreneur, dealing with human beings, you got to understand your boundaries. And those can be as simple as a hard stop time to the end of your day, putting your phone on do not disturb. Really like not answering your phone or a text message till the next day if it's like after 5 o'clock. Or if a client or a potential client gets on your on a consultation or sales call and they're in the car, a boundary is saying, hey, I don't do sales calls or consultation calls in the car. So let's reschedule, because you're honoring your time and your boundary of like, I'm not gonna, show up here half-ass or whatever that looks like for you. And then really understanding too that boundaries take communication and they take clarity. Now, when you're dealing with humans who don't have boundaries or don't understand boundaries, this can be really challenging. So that's why I encourage just letting them learn what that boundary is by just continuously taking action on the things you will not accept. So for example, another example, it's my family. Parties with my family can escalate quickly. I refuse to be at a party with my family. And I notice, as soon as I notice that energy shift in the air, I'm leaving. That's a boundary. I will not stay here and put myself through this. As a child, I was forced to be put through those situations, and it caused me a lot of emotional distress and trauma. And so as I got older, when I was able to leave the situation, take control, that was a boundary, and they didn't like it, but that's not my problem if you don't like it. I have to do what's best for my nervous system and best for me. And so you got to start though with like personal boundaries. I understand wanting to attack boundaries within your business, but starting with your personal life is going to make a big difference, because these are the interactions you have day to day. And then as you can evolve these, you can then evolve the ones in your business. Okay. So coming from someone who is still really working on her boundaries, understanding what they are, and really working on communicating them, it takes practice. And I want to make sure you give yourself grace as you are doing this, because it is not easy and it takes time. So don't be hard on yourself if you allow someone to cross a boundary, or you behave in a way that you were like trying not to, or you allowed someone to push you to say yes when you wanted to say no. And just look at everything as a learning opportunity. The more that I started to do this, as well as when I started to trust myself more. We all struggle, I think, most of us, if you're listening to this podcast, with trusting yourself, right? And trusting yourself means knowing yourself. But trusting yourself also means protecting yourself. Someone you love and trust, let's say your partner or spouse or whoever, you trust them because they respect you. You putting boundaries up is allowing you to respect yourself enough to say, this is not okay. I will not be participating in this. And so boundaries take time, but you can do it. If I can do it, you can do it. And the more boundaries that you have, I'm not saying I don't like the way I phrase that. The more you know your boundaries, the more you will start to feel confident in yourself, start knowing yourself better, feeling more worthy, feeling more trustworthy, having the ability to voice what you need. Well, that will start to come more easily. So start with one boundary. It can be so small, but the more you do it, the more you're going to feel good about it. Okay. So I hope this was helpful. Boundaries are tough. I definitely recommend read up on Brene Brown. There's also a book called Boundaries. It's by a male author. I can't remember the author's name. I will look it up and put it in the show notes, but definitely check that out as well. Remember, you're destined for more. And so working on these things is going to allow you to hit that destiny that you are striving so hard to get to. Okay. You are amazing. You are beautiful. You are loved. You are free. You're amazing. Thank you for listening to my podcast. Make sure you share it with your other sister friends. And I will talk to you guys soon.